We're live. It is Wednesday, December 16th, 2020, 5:01 p.m. My Room Raider inspired background has gotten more complicated today. As you will all notice, we have added to the pineapple with the battle axe in it two baby cannon photos, the before photo and the after photo of the eggs being fired upon. We have lighted baby cannons, and this weekend I'm going to fix all of this stuff in place so it doesn't look quite so scattered. In addition, last night Room Raider followed me on Twitter, so I thought to myself, who else does Room Raider follow on Twitter? And the answer was only Barack Obama and Justin Trudeau and a famous football player whom I'd never heard of. So, we're not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed to play games with Room Raider. But in lieu of fun, we are allowed to bring Andy Slavitt back by popular demand to discuss the all-important question of how you inject 300 million people twice with a foreign substance into their arms. Andy, who I'm not sure can hear me right now for reasons that I am not sure of,
I don't know,
welcome back to the show.
Hello.
No, he cannot hear me, so I'm going to dismiss him and then bring him back while Kate talks to you about something random.
So there have been a number of, I guess if I'm keeping track right, there are 2 vaccines that have been put out now. Moderna and Pfizer are both shipping.
Can you hear now, Andy? No,
Hello?
he cannot hear. Refresh your browser.
That's funny, because we could hear each other before, right?
Yeah, we could hear each other
Okay.
just fine a few moments ago. I think if Andy just refreshes his browser, we will be fine.
Try that.
Let's see if this helps. Sorry.
No,
you were saying, Kate.
It's fine. Oh no, I was just talking about kind of where we were with the vaccine shipping and everything else. And my understanding is that like I was just kind of going to ask you if we could kind of talk about that as a cursory thing.
Andy, can you hear us now? Whoops.
Whoop. Bummer.
Can you hear us now?
Hi.
No?
Can you hear us?
I think we can hear him.
Yeah, we can hear him perfectly. Well, a little bit more than perfectly.
So you don't hear me? No?
We don't hear you, but we hear you.
You can hear me. That's beautiful. I can't hear you guys.
Yeah.
But you look like handsome. 8 out of 10 on a Room Raider. Try taking off the headphones.
Can you hear us now, Andy? Now you're muted, but can you hear us? Just thumbs up if you can hear us. No, can't hear us.
No.
Okay. So, there was okay. This is such a bummer. I don't understand how this was working beforehand.
It was working before we went live.
Yeah, this was like all totally
And we're
fine.
regressing because we could hear Andy before and he couldn't hear us, and now nobody can hear anybody.
He's muted now.
Yeah, he's muted because he disconnected his mic when he disconnected his...
Oh, okay.
All right, let's try one more time to bring him in.
There is, I don't know what's going on.
All right, this is take 3. or something.
Is he coming back now?
I don't know. It says he's
Okay.
connected. So let's bring up to date on vaccine situation. There is vaccine being distributed among healthcare workers nationwide. This has begun. A second vaccine candidate from Moderna is all but approved and will start distributing very shortly. And so the question is, how do you manufacture very large quantities of vaccine very quickly? And also, how do you distribute them in an equitable and reasonable fashion? And I don't think this is fundamentally a healthcare question. I think it's fundamentally a logistics management question, kind of like, how do you move 100,000 troops to the border of Iraq in fighting form, and how do you
But the military is not going to be super involved in the distribution of the vaccines, are they?
Correct.
Yeah.
And probably shouldn't be, because the military is, among other things, not positioned to deliver health care to very large numbers of people, whereas I think organizations like CVS and Walgreens are. And so there's you use the entities that are best positioned to do things. But I'm kind of interested in this question of the last mile problem. Like, I can see how you can get
Oh, good. Andy says that it's working. He can hear us now.
Good.
You want to bring him back in?
I am trying to bring him back in.
Okay.
And now we just have to get him to actually show up on screen. I
think you're right. It's a last mile problem for sure.
Right. It's really easy to imagine how you get vaccine to every community in the country, but getting a vaccine from the community into every arm strikes me as a very hard problem. Yeah. Can you hear us now?
Andy.
I can.
And we can hear you. So, welcome back to the show. For God's sake, don't leave, because we might never get you back.
Because you've said everything you possibly could about vaccine distribution.
Exactly, about which I know literally nothing. So
I was going to say, Ben and I were both just posing questions while you were gone.
Posing questions. So here's my question. I understand how you get a very large quantity of vaccine into every community in the country. But I do not understand the logistics of how you get it into every arm in the country. And I'm just interested in hearing your thoughts. If you were in charge of this distribution, how would you be thinking about it? And since you're not in charge of the distribution, how impressed or not impressed are you with the way that it is being done at the federal and state levels?
Well, so let's just talk about the logistical piece. There's a couple strategic questions which I think are also interesting. But you're right, moving all of these vials across the country into the right places and getting them into people's arms is a challenge in of itself. But let's start at the beginning. So the first thing they got to do is produce the damn things. They got to produce enough of them. And they got to produce it more quickly. That's just manufacturing. Then they're going to come from two different major distributors, both overseen by the U.S. Army. McKesson is going to distribute most of the vaccines, and Federal Express is going to deliver the Pfizer vaccines. Both of them know a little bit about distribution, right? McKesson distributes most of the drugs and the flu vaccines and so forth. So they're delivering to drugstores and hospitals every day. Federal Express, they got a couple planes, some boats, some buses, some trains, etc.
They have an entire city in Tennessee.
Exactly. Most drugstores and hospitals have storage capabilities for all of the types of vaccines except probably the Pfizer one, which is like, minus 90 Fahrenheit or something like that. What you can do is, but Pfizer's invented this technology, which is sort of like, think of it like a smart igloo thermos. You bring your like cold beer to the beach on, but it's geo-sensitive and it's also GPS sensitive, so you know what the time and the temperature is at all times. There's a question of, do you have enough tubes? So Pfizer, this is a really interesting thing, Pfizer shoved 5 vaccines per tube, but guess what? I learned 2 days ago that it wasn't 5, it was 6.
Wait, really?
Yeah. So I talked to a state pharmacist who's like, you know what, when we do this, we have a 6th vaccine. What are we supposed to do with it? Because the EUA says we're only allowed to use 5. So like we got a hold of Pfizer and we're like, what's up? And they're like, well, we have, I think the way it works is like they give you a little extra in case you spill some or give somebody a little too much or whatever. But if you do it efficiently, then you've got a 6th one. And like people are throwing it out. So we're like, hey, Pfizer, why don't you file something with the FDA so we can use the 6th vaccine if people have it? So the world got 20% better just in like a day. We get the 6th one. So then it gets to, so let's just say for like most of us, we can go through the protocol if you want to, like who gets it first, but like first is going to healthcare workers, people in nursing homes, makes a lot of sense. Then and CVS and Walgreens will be doing the distribution into the nursing homes, into the senior facilities. They're driving it, and they have those skills. There are people who need to put on PPE and et cetera. Then they're going to get a list from the state, basically saying, okay, now teachers, now, and each state will take the CDC's recommendations. And they can decide whether they want to follow them exactly or they want to do their own. So like people in Alaska can say, we need the Yucca driver, I don't even know what the Yucca driver is, I made that up, to be next, right? And so the state governors can change. And so then, I'll take CVS. CVS will have an app. And then here's where it starts to get tricky, this last mile bit. So you have to say yes, not once, but twice. So I describe it this way, like I asked my wife to get married once, which was a big, challenging decision for her. But if I had to ask her twice, my odds would have gone way down.
And particularly if she'd had flu-like symptoms after the
right.
first one, she said yes. Like that's some negative feedback there.
And she did. She did have flu-like symptoms. She had like a punky arm. It was really gross.
Yeah, no. You get kind of feverish. You wonder if maybe you have the disease underlying it.
Exactly.
And, maybe they give you live virus instead of the vaccine. And then they expect you to come do it again.
Right. Exactly. And so there's the complex stuff we haven't even talked about, which is the communication, right? Like to tell people it's a good thing when that shows your immune system is activated. But so you got to get someone to come in. By the way, if they all show up at once, right, they can't maintain distance. If they go to a crowded hospital, which is seeing a lot of people, that doesn't work. So, if when they're on their game down, it'll take them a couple cycles. They'll say, "Hey Ben, you're what? You're 78, you're 80, or something like that."
Yeah.
They'll say, "Ben, but you look good." But they'll say, "Ben, anytime between, January 9th and January 16th." Come use this online thing and pick a time that works for you, and you'll pick a time. You'll go in.
And that's a text I'm going to get from CVS.
Yeah, they'll send you texts. The plan is that they'll have an app because they're going to need to monitor you, collect some data, and do a follow-up and reminder after 3 weeks. So ideally, you'll download an app. A lot of America can't download apps, as we know. They don't have.
I was going to say that.
You were right. You are right. So they're going to have to be, this is where all the strategic questions is come in. But in a most generic case, forget those edge cases, you'll come in, and they have it'll be very similar to what they do with the flu vaccine for the first year. You'll come in, you'll get your shot. They will have, they'll have some settings where just people are doing this. They'll have it in most of their stores, but not all. And so it's a little bit of a supply-demand game now, right? Because the first thing they're doing is going, okay, well, we got these 23 million, which are 1A and 1B, which are 20 million healthcare workers, 3 million people in long-term care facilities. They're just ramping up to get to those 23 million. When they start producing more, which will be in January, then they start allocating them into the stores, and then, at a certain point in time, for a while, there'll be more supply than demand. If in a perfect world, that'll keep going. In a bad world, demand will start to exceed supply.
Right.
But you'll want it to get closer and closer so that you can get it. I think we're going to be talking about weeks, not months, of play here. I don't think this is going to. We get frustrations. We'll read about things that aren't going perfectly well, but those will be tiny hiccups, I think.
So
and by and large, we'll get through this middle
what's the window
of the year.
when they say you need 2 injections 3 weeks apart? What's the window that if you miss it on the second injection, the first injection is useless?
45 seconds. Yeah, I know what you mean.
If you take 4 weeks instead of 3 weeks, is it okay?
It's 45 seconds. No, it's there's plenty. There's plenty of play because they had to stop some of these trials temporarily. There's probably a week worth of play, if not more.
Yeah. Is there so I have to ask, it strikes me as pretty idealistic to aim to do all of this via smartphones and apps and everything else, even though that would make ostensibly things much easier. I'm also starting is anyone worried at this point about bad actors potentially sending texts or doing misinformation or anything around this type of thing? I'm just thinking if my 90-year-old grandmother got a text on her non-smartphone to go to CVS, and it actually was, I don't know what someone
she would totally not turn out to vote.
Yeah, my grandmother's already not going to get a vaccine. She's like, I don't go out anyway. I'm 90 years old. I just sit in my house. It was anyway. So that's a whole other level of difficulty. But yeah, are people worried about any type of bad actors during all of this?
In this country, come on, misinformation in this country.
Shaw.
Right. So it's a great question. So first of all, before you even get to the bad actors, there's a whole bunch of communities where we have to go to them, right? We can't say, come get an app and come schedule, right? And this is where the Biden team, this is where there'll be a place where there's a stark difference between the Biden team implementation and the Trump team implementation. The Biden team has a health equity lens on, I'd say, literally every important decision they make. I think and this is actually not a criticism of the Trump team. It's just so it's plenty of work just to execute it for the average person. But they hadn't brought that lens, and at the end of the day, you end up with, if you do nothing different, you end up with huge inequities. So you have to force yourself into those processes, bringing the vaccinations to people, and as much as anything, the messages, because where the bad actors really occur is there's online Russian bots all over. I've gotten 4 different Russian on Twitter messages saying Bill Gates isn't a doctor, Bill Gates is trying to kill him. So they're all bot
Neither
accounts.
is George Soros.
Yeah, right. Well, and Jill Biden. Come on. Got a lot of
Jill Biden's official title is kiddo.
Kiddo.
And that does not entitle you to prescribe medicine.
Right. Kiddo, right. I'm going to put that on my prescriptions. But this is people tweaking with us. It's I got a good one. Let's go. This is a perfect one. Let's go call Jill. That guy is old. He's an old guy, right?
Yeah, he's
100.
He's an old Northwestern professor emeritus who was an asshole when he was young too.
Right, an asshole when he's young, and then when those guys get old. But like the thing
It's
that's
like
funny
the
is like,
assholeness extremifies.
right, I got no filter. I got no filter. But you would think there'd be a filter called the Wall Street Journal.
Well, you know, Paul Gigot is
You
not
would think.
without those tendencies himself.
Right.
You know, it's like when the filter is itself trolly, you
Right.
get a kind of trolls editing the trolls. So
what is the timeline? Sorry, go ahead, Ben. I didn't.
no,
mean to
no,
cut you off.
please.
What is the timeline, Andy? So that was something you said that you could talk about. Like, when are we back to normal? Like, when is this gonna? When are we? When am I gonna get vaccinated? According to the New York Times, I'm like in the last 3% of humans in the United States to be able to be eligible for the vaccine. Does that mean I'm going to get vaccinated next December, or does it mean I'm going to get vaccinated in June?
There are people who aren't born yet who are going ahead of you, Kate.
I mean,
No.
if it takes long enough, yeah.
No. So the short answer is probably May or June. The longer answer is I have an episode of In the Bubble with the head of CVS and one of the people who is rolling out making these decisions, and I've literally asked them every possible question. So if you want to listen to that episode, you can hear it directly from them. But I think there'll be 100 million doses by the end of March. Is what we're supposed to have. Now, here's ready for some math. Do your calculator out? It's 2 doses per person. 100 million doses. So how many? That's some number of people. It's 50 million people, right? So
Well,
that's all the
50 million,
math.
It's 50 million people if you're unless you're vaccinating people before the second dose is manufactured, right? And you could imagine having 100 million doses and saying we're confident enough toward the end of this that the last 10 million doses in 3 weeks will have. So it could be 60 million people, right?
You're so mathy. You're true. What you said is right.
So good, right?
It's so good.
Right,
Okay, so let's say between 50 and 60 million. Can we agree on that, Ben?
All right, sure.
Okay. So, and so you got the first round is 23 million people, which is again people in long-term care facilities and healthcare workers. If everybody takes it, right? And that's not clear that everybody takes it. So then you go, okay, well, who's
Is there
next?
a number on that of people who are going to not take it? Is it
Well, we don't know.
10%
Yes.
or
Yes.
50%?
So the episode we dropped this morning was from the leader of the Vaccine Confidence Project. So I can give you some pretty precise estimates of what she thinks because she's very up to date on the polling and so forth. But you need to get her kind of herd immunity you want. You need about 70% or so of people to take it, and I think
So we can live with 30% of people being assholes.
well, so God, I hate to correct you here, but they're called fucking ass. No, I'm not. I'm kidding. I was actually going to go the other way. There's legit people who have legitimate questions that are not anti-vaxxers who may not take the vaccine or may not take it for a while. And so
me, because I have anaphylactic reactions to things.
Yeah, legit.
And it seems increasingly likely that people like me are going to be advised not to take it. I'm like a fanatical pro-vaxxer. I would cheerfully take a vaccine and then drive myself to the emergency room to deal with the anaphylaxis. But I don't think CVS is going to see it that way.
Right. So I mean, pregnant women, to be a good example, until they've done more work on that, they'll say. So what you got to do is you got to ring vaccinate. What does that mean? That means everybody that comes in contact with a pregnant woman should get vaccinated. But there's also just legitimate questions. There are people who, if someone says to you, "Hey, this is a brand new vaccine platform. No one's ever taken it before. No one knows the long-term effects. It's really easy for people to be like, oh, let me give you the facts of why you shouldn't be concerned. But no, those are legit questions. I mean, you have to allow for people to have the space to go, okay, well, these are legit concerns. Who do I trust? Who can I listen to? So I think 60 to 70% of a first go-round doesn't necessarily mean, this is where I was joking, but I don't necessarily think the 30% are necessarily assholes. And by the way, there will be assholes that will take the vaccine too, so you just keep that in mind.
Yeah, being an asshole is not inconsistent with taking the
See,
vaccine.
that's me. I'm perfectly.
You're an asshole anyway?
And I'll take it. I'll totally take it.
We're getting into Frank Zappa territory here.
Yeah.
All right. Should we take some audience questions?
Totally, but yeah, and I just I want to. Okay, I could probably go on some crazy anti-vaxxer website to find this, but are there really bad examples, Andy, of mass vaccinations that have not been tested and there have been unexpected, very deleterious side effects that have happened en masse? Like, I understand people like Ben that might go into anaphylactic shock. I do understand, like, people who get a really sore arm or something like that, but are there examples that they've just, like, it's just gone terribly, terribly wrong? So as to make the vaccination not worth it?
So it's a great question, and this is where misinformation does come in. I mean, 99% of all of the things that are going to happen in a vaccine reaction are going to happen within the first 2 weeks. So it's great news that we have seen almost nothing. But then you could say to me, well, how do we know, right? I mean, if you were like really concerned about it, you could say, how do we know that 3 years from now I'm not going to develop like a third arm, right? How do I know that? And
I would definitely take it if I got a third arm. Can you imagine
by the way,
how useful
third
that would
arm
be?
sounds great.
Depends where. Depends where.
Coming out of the middle of my chest, I often, 2 hands is not enough. Think when you are grocery shopping, how useful it would be to have a third arm.
Yeah, or boxing. Yeah,
Yeah.
And you do martial arts, right? You can.
I do, and Putin would be nowhere with me if I had a third arm.
Right. So the answer to that is like, just like you don't know when you get on an airplane for absolute certain that it's not going to land. There's a lot of good evidence that it's going to land, and a lot of reason to believe it's going to land. So you can get yourself into mindsets of saying, "Am I absolutely positive?" But look, the other reality is like, do you want to hug your kids again? Do you want to have dinner with your friends again? Do you want to? Do we all want to go back to a normal life? And do we want to keep other people safe? And so, I think vaccines are the greatest invention that I can think of. I can't think of anything that's ever been invented that's greater, cooler, more powerful. And we just happen to get very, very lucky with these vaccines because it did not have to turn out this way. It did not have to turn out that we'd have a 90 to 95% effective vaccine. So as the stories come in and as you hear rumors, the thing that the Vaccine Confidence Project is all about is, she's like, the rumors will be flying everywhere. Case of this of that, and those rumors will be used by bad actors to sow fear and to sow doubt. And those rumors are going to make people concerned, understandably. But she said something really interesting, which is the way you fight misinformation isn't with information. The way you fight misinformation is with building trust and having trusted conversations.
I just want to say about anti-vax sentiment as a general matter, it is largely, not exclusively, because there are entities like, the Taliban, which kill healthcare workers who are trying to deliver polio vaccine in areas where polio is still endemic. It does happen. But the anti-vax world is largely a function of a world that has the luxury of not actually worrying much about infectious disease. And that, like, you know, infectious disease really sucks. And if you get rid of enough of it so that the worst thing you're likely to catch is the flu or the common cold, or venereal infections. If you really actually control infectious disease well enough, then it's a little bit like Kaiser Soze. You know, people, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled is convincing the world he didn't exist. People forget about how bad and ugly infectious disease is, and they start resenting the tools that you use to control it.
Right. So interesting. The early 60s, before the measles vaccine, 2.3 million kids were dying every year. Right? That's like, I imagine that. I mean, I can't even imagine that world. But then you get in this world where you're like, oh, nobody's like, do I really want to give my kids the measles vaccine? You're exactly right, Ben. That only happens when you've got the privilege and the luxury to do that. Now, there are three reasons why people say they won't take vaccines. Number one, they've got concerns about the safety of a specific element in the vaccine. Number two, they're libertarian. They don't like to be told what to do, and they think this is some libertarian plot. And number three, nature. They're all natural. They don't want to put anything into their bodies that they think is chemical. Now, we can judge whether those are legitimate reasons or illegitimate reasons, but I'm just reporting to you that those are the three most common reasons.
All right. The first question comes from Tomas Ilves, joining us from Estonia, of which he used to be the president.
Hi, can you hear me today?
I sure can.
Great. Okay. Well, I mean, first of all, just a quick comment to Ben. The richest county in California, Marin County, is approaching measles herd immunity, or polio herd immunity levels, I mean, from above, going worse. Because they're also hip and trendy. They don't vaccinate their kids. And you need 80% herd immunity. And in Marin County, it is, well, at least a year or two ago, it was approaching herd immunity level.
You're making my point.
I'm saying the richest people.
I understand. It's the luxury. It's the luxury of people who don't have, you know, once you don't have to worry about it, you start worrying about the remedies, and then so people start resenting the vaccines. They have the luxury of, because they don't deal with infectious disease, and then when enough of them get measles, they'll discover that they're actually a little bit less worried about the bullshit risk of their kids becoming autistic as a result of
just their kids, because the mutation in polio is so rapid that it also destroys the immunity of the people who are vaccinated, because you get new strains. Anyway, that was my question. I have a question for Mr. Slavitt. Today, the news came out an hour or two ago that Paul Alexander actually called for millions of Americans to be infected. And the quote to him is, infants, kids, teens, young people, young adults, middle-aged with no conditions have zero to little risk. So we use them to develop herd immunity. We want them infected. I mean, is this even legal? I mean, does this violate some kind of convention on
right
biological warfare? I mean, this
sounds like a war crime. Yeah, so there's an article in Politico for those who didn't see it. It's written by Dan Diamond. The House, one of the investigative committees, found some emails where Paul Alexander said that we need to start getting people infected. And just so we're clear, so first of all, look, we're going to hear from the administration. This is one guy. They let this guy do his thing for months, and he was basically trying to persuade the CDC and the FDA that was the right way to go. And by the way, not very far from Scott Atlas, and what he's been doing. So, and look, this is disproven. This is just the most. This is like leeches, right? This is the most disproven scientific theory you can imagine. And look, I don't know that they were poorly intentioned, but I can tell you that they did not have people's best interest at heart. This is lazy at best. The best interpretation of it is these are people who just didn't want to do anything, and just pull this crap.
Can I ask a stupid question about herd immunity and the Trump administration? It seems to me that they have confused herd immunity as a state with herd immunity as a policy. That is, like, sensible people can sit around and say, how much penetration of either vaccine or disease do you need before you have herd immunity, right? Say the number 70% gets thrown around a lot. And that you can say, okay, it's an objective to vaccinate enough people that we have herd immunity, and we can figure in the people who've already had it. But they seem to be confusing that with, like, the policy objective, if we can infect enough people, we'll get to herd immunity, as though it doesn't matter how you get that antibody penetration. You just, like if they were walking around with disease in syringes. Am I missing something, or is that just a confusion on their part that borders on the moronic?
No, well, so they believed there's a core assumption they believed, which is that you can isolate everybody to whom this would be dangerous for, right? So that you could take every old person, and by the way, 90% of older people live in the community. They don't live in isolated settings, and even those who live in isolated settings, there are people that work there that come in and out every day. So it's impossible. It was impossible. It didn't work in Sweden. It didn't work here. It hasn't worked anywhere. The only way you save older people, is what you do. What they did in Japan is you get rid of community spread, and nobody in nursing homes died in Japan because people weren't dying anywhere. That's the only way it happens. So, but if you have to accept that premise that you can actually isolate, and then you go, okay, well then what about all the people that are pre-existing conditions and that are predisposed, or what about the people that has long-term impacts on? And then you forget the fact that no one knows how long immunity lasts for. So you could go do all of that, and a year later find that most of those people have lost their immunity. So there's so many holes in the theory, but what it allows you to do is it allows you to justify saying, I don't have to close any restaurants. I don't have to give up any of my life for some remote chance that I'm going to die. Why should I have to not get on an airplane or go to see an Alabama football game? That's all it is.
Gotcha.
Can I ask a question, Andy? How are they going to judge how long immunity might last? Is it purely like as people like? So basically, like, like how are we going to have coronavirus out there in the wild if there are enough people who've gotten vaccinated? How will we even in any type of like kind of controlled study way have enough exposure as to know whether or not people can become recontaminated or not?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to do something different here that they've never done before, which is what they call collecting what they call real world evidence, which is just exactly what it sounds like. So they'll
people be like, I was vaccinated or I had it, and then they get it again, and they're just like,
right.
well, fuck. So
yeah.
Okay.
Well, they don't. Yeah. So we don't know how often you'll need to get the vaccine. They think it'll be yearly, but they don't know for sure. And they'll learn more. They also don't know for sure whether or not if you're vaccinated you can still spread COVID, be completely asymptomatic and spread it. They don't think so, but they don't know for sure. There's a few questions that aren't answered yet. People I think are generally more on the optimistic side if they were guessing, but people shouldn't guess. There's just not enough waters run yet to have an understanding for how long this thing lasts, what's the impact on T cells, which are the permanent cells. So we're going to learn. Then, and then of course everybody's like, well, what if this morphs, and then the vaccine doesn't work anymore? So, and what's really interesting is there are people who at the same time are like, I can't believe I'm not higher on the list to get a vaccine, and then they're like also, why are they making me take a vaccine? Like, our brains are complex. Like, you could legit have those two thoughts in your head at the same time.
Yeah, that's some Woody Allen like stuff, or Groucho Marx. I want to be higher on the list so that I can refuse it earlier.
Right.
Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Yeah, I had some trouble with my audio, but
Indeed.
Can you hear me? Thank you. So what are your thoughts on the recently approved home test by Lieu? Are there other tests from manufacturers in the works? And given that large quantities are probably not available till next summer, what's the most effective way for it?
Cool, good question. So just to refresh people on this, the FDA approved yesterday, didn't get as much attention because of all the vaccines stuff, the first test that you can use at home without a prescription from a doc. You have to buy a little thing that's like $30 that I think will be available in January, and then you'll be able to. It works with a smartphone app and a couple of things. It's a little less ideal. I mean, the end state where this has to be is, and there will be something where you could just literally a piece of paper that you get wet and you put some salt water on. Much more like that works the same way a pregnancy test actually works. Looks for the proteins. Those are going to be incredibly useful. Now, there's a fine point here, which is that we're used to thinking about how accurate is this test. These tests are going to be less accurate, but they're going to have two benefits that I think outweigh that. One is they will be very accurate at predicting how contagious you are, which is a question you want to know. If you have remnants of it but are no longer contagious, it will not be as good, but that's less relevant because you can still go out then. And the second thing is it will be cheap. And cheap is more important than accurate in some ways, because if you took a test that's 70% accurate, you could take it every day. That's better than taking a test that's 95% accurate that you could have only afforded to take once a month. So there's trade-offs. That means that you can't take any particular result to the bank, but if you do it often enough, and evidence suggests twice a week, if you test college, they took two colleges, University of Wisconsin and BU. One of them, you can guess which one, they only tested kids at the college who, once they got sick, and massive amounts of people were sick. And the other one, they tested every kid, whether they had symptoms or not, twice a week. And in that second school, they had virtually no cases. You can guess which school is which, but it just tells you that 2 days a week is a good number.
Anya Scheis, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Scheis. Welcome to In Lieu of Fun. I don't think you have actually been on screen before, but welcome. The floor is yours. Your question.
Thank you very much. Yeah, happy to be on the screen. So, Andy, I have more of a prognostication, I guess, question, but which is, when you look at what the effects of COVID-19 have been over the past 9 months, it's accelerated a lot of technology modernization in healthcare. So, 10x the number of telemedicine visits this year, for example, than in 2019. I'm wondering how the logistics around vaccine distribution might improve our public or primary healthcare delivery system, which, as you know, is not only bad by global, developed country standards, but bad compared to Cuba, for example. So wondering if, like, the move to, moving care to the edges, places like pharmacies, phlebotomy labs, if that could be a result, or what other things might spur improvement in primary public health coming out of this crisis.
So it's a great question, except for the part where you try to get me to say something nice about Cuba and get it on tape to damn me for the future. I saw it was very tricky of you. No, I'm kidding. It was it's a good question, and and probably not enough time to do it justice given the quality of the question and all the issues that are involved. But writ large, the opportunity to say, okay, now we've learned that there's huge inequities in the healthcare system. There's so many kids don't have internet and they can't work from home. So many kids can't get lunches, school lunches. We learn all these things. They were all true before the pandemic.
Yep.
They've been true during the pandemic. And it's completely up to us whether they're going to be true after the pandemic. And there's a lot of people that say there's advances that we can make here. Why go backwards? And, I actually have a team working on paper and a set of recommendations, but the public actually feels very strongly the way that caller, I don't want to mispronounce her name, suggested, which is that we can take some of these things and go for. People like telemedicine, to take a simpler example. But the truth is, one of the reasons why San Francisco did measurably better than every other city in the U.S. on COVID-19 is because they had experience with HIV. So they actually had some public health infrastructure. They had a lot of muscle memory. They have a lot of infectious disease people. And they'd seen it before and they could react to it. Where the rest of the country was like, oh, bullshit. This is nothing. We don't, and they didn't have infrastructure. They didn't have belief system. Next time something comes, there will be muscle memory on the public health front. But even for the day-to-day, which is, I think, the gist of that question, even the day-to-day, the idea that, Ben, if you're sick or contagious, it affects me, it's something that we should all kind of inhale and inherit a little bit, because you can't get there with our kind of healthcare system.
Yeah, and it really goes against some American ethos stuff that, I'm responsible for me and you're responsible for you, and communitarianism should go fuck itself.
I was just gonna say it's not the communitarian kind of ethos. I have a question. You don't have to answer this because we should go to the question, but I'm just going to, before I forget it. On that point, I'd be interested, after we finish up questions, if you could talk a little bit about, as much as we've learned a lot of good new technology or good new methodology coming out of the last 10 months, what has this cost us in terms of studies and other types of research and development on drugs and other types of lethal diseases that we've just completely diverted resources from in pursuit of a vaccine and better treatment for COVID? But again,
why don't you address that now, because we'll lose it in the shuffle if you don't.
Sorry. Yeah, it was a little bit related to the last question.
It's easy to answer because I don't know the answer. So my two choices are to make some bullshit up, or to say I really don't know. I think that's going to be looked at. I think there's going to be so many hidden opportunity costs like that we're going to learn, and some of them, those, we may not learn for decades. Oh yeah, back in 2020 we lost a year, and that really hurt us. But you're right, every lab in the country, every researcher, they're all student body left towards COVID. And, that's a legitimate issue.
All right, Stephen, the floor is yours. I think you're also a new questioner, yeah?
Second question.
Second time?
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Time. Thank you. I just want to say hi, guys. Thanks for taking my question. I think my question would be, how soon would testing begin for vaccination under? I thought the limit was 18 and under. Or how safe, or when will it be safe for people under 18? Because I have a child that has pre-existing conditions, and so my wife and I will be paying attention to what I guess the side effects might be, when it comes to people with heart conditions and whatnot.
Yeah. So is your child wearing a yellow shirt?
Oh, sorry. I removed him already.
You moved him. I know.
You guys pretend to read his mind.
Pretty clever. Yes.
That was a very cute.
That was a cute kid. Yes.
Kid, I know.
Totally. These kids steal show. So the actual data the actual decision that they made at the FDA was 16 and above instead of 18 and above, and there was some pretty good debate, and there was some dissension. There were some people on the scientific committee who actually recommended at 18, but they won at 16, and they're, I think, beginning to do tests already on next age group down, the next age group down. There's no reason to think that this isn't going to be safe. There's probably some question around dosing levels for people in smaller bodies. Someone just said on the side that it will be 18 for Moderna. Moderna is not approved here yet in the U.S., so I'm speaking specifically about Pfizer, so that's a good correction. But what you get in your town will vary based upon decisions the state makes. So you may be in a Pfizer, you may be you may be getting the Moderna. But this is where ring vaccination, if you have a child who's got pre-existing conditions, is important. That's why teachers have to be high on the list, and that's why. Look, if in general, expect to be like, if you've got a risk factor, expect to be like a step behind everybody else in terms of taking off your safety measures. And one of our big risks this year is that people pull off the safety measures too quickly. They say, "Oh, people are getting vaccinated. I'm going to go do much more indoor events, or I'm going to stop wearing masks, or what have you." This is absolutely a transition year. The first part of the year is going to suck, and the end of the year is going to be good. In the middle, it's going to get better, and it's going to do it very unevenly, based upon community by community and risk factor by risk factor. So there may be a point in time when you feel like your kids are it's a little bit unfair because your kids aren't able to do the things that other kids are because you're being extra careful. And I think it's going to be that kind of year where we're all going to be going through so many different experiences with the goal that by the time we get to the middle to the back half of the year, the community spread is so low that it's better for everybody.
All right. Which brings us to one of everybody, who is Daniel, who is camouflaged against his big black chair. What's on your mind, Daniel?
Can you hear me?
You have a number of questions in there, all of them worth talking about, but choose the best one.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm curious, how confident are you that the media is going to responsibly report on alleged side effects? Because just because of the law of large numbers, we can expect weird shit to happen to people. After they get vaccinated, there's going to be an impulse to attribute it to the vaccine when it's just a random event.
The third arm, for example. Some people just grow a third arm, and it has nothing to do with the vaccination they just received.
And how confident can we be that the media will, clearly say this is correlation, not causation, until they investigate?
It's a great question, and I think the answer is about as confident as we are in the media and everything else, which is not a shot at the media. It's to say that some are more responsible than others. So, I expect that most of the mainstream media they'll go to Pfizer and say, "Pfizer, we heard reports that, Ben grew an arm out of his chest, and what do you have to say about that?" And the truth is, there's going to be coincidental events, right? You're going to give it to a lot of old people in nursing homes, and guess what? Some of them are going to pass away, and then the media will people will have to investigate, and we have to be a little bit patient. And I think the good journalists, and there are a lot of good journalists out there, will run it down and report it. And it's like we've been doing all this time. It's like the information seems very out of context. This is why it's a great question. It just sort of comes out of nowhere. Oh my God, I heard there was a this, and then it gets spread, and it gets spread, and it gets spread, and eventually, and this is the job of the CDC in the Biden administration is going to be to have a reliable voice, an honest voice, and if there are issues, to be very upfront about those issues and say, yes, you know, if you have anaphylactic shock, you should probably not get the vaccine or what have you, and just be very candid. There will always be opportunity for anybody to have their bias confirmed these days. So if people want to find someone to say that this is, you know, dangerous or great or concerning or whatever, we can pick our own media sources. So, you know, it's going to be variable, and it'll keep people pushing their corners. I do know that there are, again, are Russian bots and information machines already out there that are trying to sow these seeds of doubt. So that makes me a little concerned.
So just since you mentioned the CDC, do you have a view of the CDC director designate, Rochelle Walensky?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I'll just tell you the honest thought that went through my head is like, the bar, I don't mean this to sound politically, but the bar compared to what we have today is so fucking low. This is a responsible, honest, direct, highly communicative person. She's actually someone I don't know personally. I know just about one of the other people, but everybody that I've heard from that knows her just says, you know, unimpeachable kinds of things about her. The truth is, though, this is more than that. This is a management job. Communication science is like not about good intentions. It's like legit doing it the right way, and it's harder than it seems. But I also think Vivek Murthy will be a big part of kind of playing the America's doctor role in his role as Surgeon General. So hopefully having consistent voices, and then Fauci, I think feels like he will be able to communicate much more directly with the public and not have to dance on the end of a pin.
So I did know Rochelle Walensky back when we were 17 and went to high school together, and had no idea. Yeah, she was in my chemistry class with Josh Sharfstein. And
I was just gonna ask. Wait, I was like with Josh.
Yeah, Josh and Rochelle and I were all in the same chemistry class with Mrs. Cater, who probably has trained more of the Biden administration than any other science teacher in any high school. But I had no idea that Rochelle Bursoff, whom I went to high school with and lost touch with completely as soon as we left high school, was this person until I saw her picture when she was announced as Biden's new CDC director, and I immediately pinged
her high school yearbook photo.
No, that would be she looked fine in high school. It's not like that wouldn't be a terrible thing to do. It's just unfair, and it's not the right thing to do. So I'm not going to do it. But I have no sense of her since then, save that running Mass Gen is no small management thing, and is a very traditional qualification to be a CDC director. And it's nice that it has nothing to do with, your views of contested social issues. Bob Herzog.
I think that explains the vetting question. Do you know Ben? That all the candidates were asked.
Yeah, they've all been asked that.
Everyone
to the extent that you get through vetting without asking that, Devin Nunes asks it now when people testify. So, like, there's a learned answer. No, I don't know that guy. I don't know who he is. Bob Herzog, you got the last question today.
Hi, everybody. I was just wondering what strategies we have to make sure that people actually go back for their second shot.
Yep. So
you got your app, you got your pesky phone calls, and now it's week 3, 21 days has passed. and Ben Wittes has not showed up for his second marriage proposal, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, I think there's going to be some drop off, just because it's more friction. Now remember, I will say this: the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is only one shot when it comes, but they have, when you do your first shot, they will give you a date for your second shot, and they will pester you if you don't show up, I think do everything they can to follow up. I mean, you get some benefit from the first shot, I've actually heard people argue that getting 100% of people to do one shot or 100%, a larger percentage of people to do one shot could have as much benefit as having everybody do two. The difference is that people don't make decisions on behalf of everybody. We all make decisions on behalf of ourselves. So, we'll want the booster if we can get it. Now, why wouldn't I go back for the booster? Either it was such a pain for me to get it the first time because I had childcare and couldn't get away, and my life doesn't, it makes it too hard because of my life circumstance, or because the second time, I'm that really hurt my muscle or my arm, and it didn't feel good, and I felt kind of out of it for a day, and I really don't want to. So the first reason, man, that's the life stuff that people deal with every day. The second reason requires some explanation and some anticipation and letting people know that you have two choices. You could have the inflammation in your arm, or you could have it in your heart or lungs. Take it in your arm. We'd all choose that at any time.
Especially if you're getting a third one a couple of weeks later.
A third one?
A third arm.
Oh, a third arm.
If you have grow a third arm, do you need a vaccination?
Who cares?
Oh yeah, no, right. You don't worry about your second arm. To your point, because you're gonna get a third one, as Kate says, or more of you to vaccinate.
All right, we are going to leave it there. Andy Slavitt, this is the most upbeat conversation we have had on the subject of COVID in 265 days in a row of doing this damn show. And it's way more upbeat than the last time we had you on the show. And fortunately, we haven't discussed how to keep the body count down in the interim, which is a super depressing subject. But since our audience knows the answer to that question, and we are the compliant people who go out and wear masks or don't go out at all, I think I am going to do something that I don't ever do, which is to ask everybody watching this show to tweet it. Because, with all the disinformation that's going around on Twitter and elsewhere, or Facebook, it would be a pretty good thing if 300, 400 people or so tweeted a serious conversation where we got a lot of questions asked and answered about vaccines. And if you're one of those clever YouTube users who knows how to start at the 10-minute mark, then you can even start after the audio problems that prevented us from bringing Andy in right at the beginning. Andy, thank you so much for joining us again. Kate, who do we have tomorrow? We have Susan Landau tomorrow. Yeah, we have. The next 2 days are cybersecurity days. We have, in honor of Alice, not Eve, we have Susan Landau, who has agreed to join us tomorrow. And we also have Mika Oyang of Third Way, who's a cyber enforcement specialist, joining us on Friday. We'll talk Russian hacks of every major corporation and government agency worth targeting through the scary named solar winds, because stellar wind wasn't enough for people. Just saying, for those of you who develop back-end software, if you name it wind with a space term of 2 syllables starting with S in front of it. Stellar, solar, sociopathic, all the wins you could develop. It's going to get hacked. I mean, that's just like an invitation. Just saying, those are our next 2 days. They will start 22 hours, 54 minutes from now. And until then, Kate?
We don't have fun anymore, but we do have third arms to look forward to. So
They're coming, people. You're gonna get your shot, and the eruption. It'll be like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen How to Get Ahead in Advertising, where you really need to see it. It's a wonderful movie. It'll be like that. I'm just gonna leave it at
Okay.
that, so I don't get accused of a spoiler.